1776 by David Mccullough. David Mccullough, probably my favorite history writer of all time, goes through 1776, the most pivotal year in all of American history. Most of the time, books like this will tackle the entire revolution, but he does something amazing here by focusing just on this single year. From the side of the American cause, 1776 was a brutal year. You start off with forcing the British out of Boston, which makes you feel good, and then the British come and attack New York, and it's just defeat after defeat for the revolutionaries. General Washington loses thousands of men, either to being killed or captured. He loses the strategic territory of New York, so that the colonies are effectively cut in half, and he's being undermined from inside his own ranks. It is just a tough, brutal year. So if you're watching this from a distance, this would seem to be the predictable outcome. You have the most well-trained, most powerful military force coming to your little part of the world with all its might, and you're trying to defend yourself with the unorganized volunteer farmers, people who aren't particularly well trained. Like, you'd naturally see a crushing defeat coming. And I don't think you'd imagine that the cause is going to last much longer. Indeed, in this book, a lot of the generals are talking about this whole revolution idea being done by Christmas time. The most remarkable part about this book to me is the story of George Washington, because he is at the helm, and he starts off as the hero, but then he just keeps losing and losing against the British in this battle for New York, and it's just getting worse and worse. He feels his reputation slipping. He feels he feels the influence of people talking bad about him and talking about replacing him, and he has to deal with all that stress upon him. He talks about it in this book. He's quoted as talking about this as the most stressful time and unpleasant time of his life. And you can see why. And what's fascinating about this is why he doesn't just give up, because a lot of times he's given the chance to make terms with the British. And he'd probably be better off in taking advantage of that. But this is why George Washington is either number 1 or 2 for the greatest presidents in the history of the country. I think he should be number 1 for this reason, because what else does he have to hold on to besides this idea of revolution, besides the core principles that are at stake here? I love this book for going through the letters and going through what George Washington might have been thinking to get at the answer to that question. Similarly, I loved David Mccullough getting into some of the side characters, like Washington's generals that were loyal to him, Greene and Knox especially. I know that there are some really good books written about each of them, and now I want to explore them, because what a time to be in your 20s and 30s as a general to George Washington. It's just fascinating people. It's funny, they are all so different from each other, and the book does a good job of going into the characters, how they're different and yet unified in this underlying cause. One thing that this book goes into that I don't usually see with books on the American Revolution is what's going on in London. How are Londoners seeing these American defeats? What are the arguments in Parliament about the American arguments of no taxation without representation? Like, how is that back and forth? And that gets to another thing that I think is a striking point in the book, is how this is a battle of ideas. Thomas Paine is an amazing character in American history because he doesn't do that much except write extremely influential pamphlets. He starts with Common Sense, of course, and then as the American cause is faltering and everything's falling apart, he rushes out this pamphlet, The American Crisis, and we hear the words, "These are the times that try men's souls." It's amazing how powerful words can be in the right situations, because Thomas Paine takes the suffering of the American military and puts it in a framework to where they are willing to keep fighting, even though they have every reason to give up and stop fighting. He's able to tie their suffering into this greater cause. And then the book closes with the end of the year, 1776, Christmas Eve, and George Washington does the surprise attack at Trenton, crossing the Delaware, and he is the hero again. It's not a huge victory, except it's a huge victory in morale. It's not the full-on surrender of the British that's going to come years later, but it's just a tiny hint, a foretaste of what might be possible down the road. And And so that's what the book and the year leaves us with. So I've got the book here. I've got to read the last 2 paragraphs of the book of how he summarizes this year for the American cause. The year 1776, celebrated as the birth year of the nation and for the signing of the Declaration of Independence, was for those who carried the fight for independence forward a year of all too few victories, of sustained suffering, disease, hunger, desertion, cowardice, disillusionment, defeat, terrible discouragement, and fear, as they would never forget, but also the phenomenal courage and bedrock devotion to country, and that, too, they would never forget. Especially for those who had been with Washington and who knew what a close call it was at the beginning, how often circumstance, storms, contrary winds, the oddities or strengths of individual character had made the difference, the outcome seemed little short of a miracle. All I can say is I'm going to really miss David Mccullough. I'm sad that he died recently because his books are amazing, especially on American history, and I highly recommend them. I'm going to give this book 5 stars.